Imagine this: in the very moment you're sitting here believing you are the one steering your life, somewhere deep beneath the fragile shell of consciousness, another is living, watching, and at times deciding for you. Have you ever wondered why there are moments when you act in complete contradiction to what you believe? Why even the most intelligent, self-aware people repeat the same old mistakes as if an invisible hand pulls them back to the same crossroads? This is not just a tale of modern psychology. It is a secret carried across thousands of years, hidden in ancient myths, sacred symbols, and even in the dreams you had last night. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That sentence is like a mirror reflecting a truth that startles us awake. How much of your life is truly your choice, and how much is merely the reflex of a script written in the shadows? You may think you know yourself, but unless you have confronted your shadow, you've only heard half the story. Here's the paradox: human beings fear the dark, yet we cannot truly grow without stepping into it. Just as a seed can only sprout when buried in the darkness of the soil, your soul too needs its descent into the uncharted depths in order to break open into wholeness. This is no pleasant journey. It is riddled with conflict, doubt, and moments of disorientation. And yet it is precisely in this chaos that the true fragments of who you are begin to emerge. Think back to a moment in your life when everything seemed to fall apart, when work failed, a relationship ended, or a loss left you unrecognizable to yourself. In that moment, did it feel as though you were standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into a fog-filled abyss? That is when the call of the unconscious rises, not to destroy you, but to invite you through another doorway where a new shape of your being is waiting to be born. Jung called this the transcendent function, the bridge between the conscious world and the deep hidden darkness. But how do we find the courage to step onto that bridge when every instinct urges us to turn back? This is where ancient symbols become the language of the soul. The hero facing the dragon, the maiden braving the dark forest, the alchemist seeking the philosopher's stone. These are not just fairy tales for children, but inner maps for the human spirit. Once you realize that these stories are the soul's own code, you see that every shadow hides a treasure. And then a greater question begins to stir. If the I've always believed myself to be, is only a small fragment of the whole picture, then what is the entire image? Perhaps we are not here merely to perfect what is known, but to discover what has never been imagined. For behind that door of the unconscious, a vaster self waits patiently, like a seed awaiting spring to break open and rise. In the next few minutes, I will guide you deeper from Jungian principles to real-life stories to practical ways you can walk into the shadow safely yet fully. But before we begin, ask yourself, are you ready to meet yourself? Not the role you've been playing, but the one you truly are, even if that image might terrify you. If your answer is yes, then this journey is yours. Now let us take the first step into the darkness. To why that when we begin the journey of self-discovery, one of the most puzzling and yet most powerful concepts we encounter is the shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is not evil. It is everything within us that our conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. It may be the anger we try to suppress, the envy we don't want to admit, or even the creative potential we've never dared to touch. What confuses many people is the belief that the shadow is only the bad side of human nature, like a personal criminal record. But Jung emphasized the shadow is the entire unlived side of us both, negative and positive, and if we never recognize it, we remain only half a person. We can compare this to Winnicott's psychoanalytic concept of the false self. The false self is the mask we develop to adapt to social expectations, while the shadow is the real content that gets pushed out of awareness. The false self is the stage. The shadow is the cast of actors banished backstages, till whispering, still pulling invisible strings. And then there are moments like when we lose control in a burst of anger, or find ourselves trapped in a painfully familiar pattern, when the shadow steps out into the spotlight. In everyday life, you can spot the shadow everywhere. The person who insists they are always kind, but seethes with rage when others don't follow their lead. The employee who always obeys, but feels suffocated whenever their boss gives them new tasks. Or perhaps you when you feel instant dislike for someone, not because they've done something wrong, but because they mirror a part of yourself you've never accepted. Jung called this projection, when we assign to others what we refuse to see in ourselves. Interestingly, in American culture, where individuality is celebrated and competition is seen as a driving force, the shadow often hides more subtly. We are taught to always stay positive, to always be strong, and as a result, emotions like vulnerability, fear, or dependence are pushed even further underground. They build up surfacing later as stress, depression, or toxic relationships. Many confuse the shadow with a religious notion of sinful instincts, thinking prayer alone will erase it. But Jung saw it differently. The shadow cannot be erased. It can only be recognized, accepted, and integrated into consciousness, becoming a vital part of the whole self. I once witnessed this in a woman I knew, a successful creative director in New York, who came to therapy feeling empty and meaningless, despite having everything, money, fame, status. Through exploring her dreams and memories, she discovered her shadow was a passion for painting. Her family had mocked it as impractical when she was a child. For years, she had buried this part of herself in order to become the strong woman society wanted. Gradually reconnecting with this passion didn't make her quit her career, but it restored her joy and creative spark, something no amount of money or recognition had ever brought. To identify the shadow, Jung recommended using special mirrors. Dreams, strong emotional reactions, and conflicts in relationships. You can begin by noting the moments when you feel the most anger, jealousy, or judgment toward others, and instead of asking, why are they like that? Try asking, what part of me is being touched right now? This is the first step in the transcendent function, building a bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. Imagine us modern humans, psychological explorers, each holding an unfinished map. The part of the map we've drawn is our conscious self. The blank, uncharted areas are the shadow. You can choose to stay in the familiar zone forever, but the rest of the map still exists, and sometimes the creatures in those blank spaces will come looking for you. So why not step into them, intentionally carrying the light of awareness, and see what's there? If you're listening to this and feel a subtle stirring inside, a pull to explore deeper, you are not alone. Thousands of others are on the same path, and by sharing their stories, dreams, and shadows without judgment, they not only learn from their own experience, but also help illuminate the way for others. This is why I invite you to connect with our community, a place where your inner truths, even the hidden ones, are welcome. Because this journey is not about becoming perfect by someone else's standards, it's about becoming whole, both light and darkness. And when you begin to accept that, you'll see the shadow not as an enemy, but as an old friend waiting to be recognized. In the next part, we'll go deeper into something especially fascinating: how ancient symbols from Greek mythology to the images in your dreams become the keys to unlocking the shadow. You'll see how stories that seem far removed from our lives today are actually mirrors reflecting your soul right now. And that's where we'll begin decoding the timeless messages the unconscious has been sending for thousands of years. Hey, Bree. Once we begin to recognize the shadow, the next question inevitably arises. How do I speak with it and reconcile with it? This is where symbols, the language of the unconscious, become the key. Carl Jung discovered that across culture, from the rituals of Native American tribes to Greek myths to medieval frescoes, human beings have always created images and stories that mirror the inner journey. They are never random. These are archetypes, the deep-rooted patterns that live in the collective unconscious, functioning as a shared spiritual inheritance of humankind. Jung once analyzed a series of dreams from a patient in which each dream formed a chapter of a psychological transformation. He noticed recurring figures: the wise old man, the nurturing mother, the serpent, the hero, even though the patient had never encountered similar myths. This led him to a profound realization: the collective unconscious is not just a storage of memories. It is a living, active force that continually sends messages through images, guiding the soul toward evolution. Imagine dreaming you are lost in a dark forest. A wolf appears, at first threatening, but then leads you to a crystal-clear spring. On the surface, it's a strange nightmare with a pleasant twist. From Jung's perspective, the wolf might be the archetype of primal instinct, the wild shadow aspect necessary for survival, and the spring represents rebirth, the reward for walking alongside the shadow rather than running from it. In daily life, symbols don't appear only in dreams. They hide in the stories you love, the films that haunt you, or the characters you feel just get you though you've never met them. If you are always drawn to rebellious yet sincere characters, Your unconscious may be inviting you to reconnect with your own inner freedom, the part that dares to break the mold. Why should we care about symbols? Because as Jung said, the symbol is the best possible expression for something that cannot yet be fully understood. When we cannot put our fear, longing, or inner conflict into words, symbols serve as the bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. And each time you decode a personal symbol, you move closer to individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole person where the conscious and unconscious unite. Try this exercise. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw or write the first image that comes to mind without editing, without judgment. Then ask yourself, what in my life does this image remind me of? This is not an art game, it is a doorway into dialogue with your unconscious. Jung himself did this when creating the Red Book, listening to inner voices and giving them form. Here, the power doesn't lie in getting the right answer. Like a test, it lies in personal experience. When you share your image with someone and they share theirs, you'll notice that while the symbols are personal, the feelings and messages behind them often resonate deeply with others. That is why I invite you to join our community space to share dream symbols and stories and to receive reflections from fellow travelers. Not to decode you, but to illuminate the blind spots we can rarely see alone. As you begin to live in dialogue with symbols, something remarkable happens. The outer world and inner world start to speak the same language. You notice synchronicities, the right book appearing at the exact moment you need it, an old friend calling just when you're seeking advice, or a scene in a film mirroring your exact inner state. Jung believed these moments were not coincidences, but the meeting of the unconscious and reality a sign you are moving in alignment with your personal path. However, don't mistake symbols for fantasies. A fantasy closes the question. A symbol opens it to deeper meaning. The moment you turn a symbol into a fixed formula, it loses its life. Our task is to listen, interact, and allow symbols to guide us rather than trying to control them. In the next section, we will go deeper still to the place where the inner opposites meet. Jung called this Konjunktio, the sacred union of the masculine and feminine, within of logic and intuition, of light and shadow. This is a pivotal turning point, the threshold of true spiritual maturity. And when you understand it, you will see every conflict, every inner tension is an opportunity for wholeness. Prepare yourself, because this is the part where the mind may argue, but the heart will recognize it instantly. That there is one point Carl Jung never ceased to emphasize. Inner transformation is not merely a symbolic experience. It is a deeply practical journey, measurable in the changes we see in our behavior, emotions, and relationships. In psychology and alchemy, he called the Konjunktio, the sacred marriage, a pivotal stage when the opposing forces within the psyche, masculine and feminine reason and feeling consciousness, and the unconscious find their harmony. This is not just a mystical idea. Modern psychology supports it. Daniel Siegel's 2012 research on interpersonal neurobiology shows that when people learn to integrate opposing parts of the brain, their life satisfaction and emotional resilience increase dramatically. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." This means that before opposites can unite, they often clash both internally and externally. A highly rational person, when faced with their long-suppressed emotions, may feel lost. A deeply intuitive person, when confronted with the demands of logic, may feel restricted. Yet it is precisely this friction that generates the energy for transformation. Consider a 2020 American Psychological Association survey. 72% of Americans reported experiencing deep inner conflict over major life decision, career choices, marriage, whether to have children. The fascinating finding. Those who said they allowed both reason and emotion to take part in the decision reported 35% higher satisfaction than those who tried to eliminate emotion or ignore logic. This perfectly echoes Jung's principle: we only mature when we accept both poles and find a way for them to work together. One case Jung analyzed involved a woman who dreamed she was marrying a strange man, both frightening and alluring. In therapy, this figure was recognized as her animus, the inner masculine archetype representing reason, strength, and the ability to act. The marriage in the dream symbolized the union of her feminine intuition, her conscious self, and her masculine logic, her unconscious counterpart. After this process, she reported feeling more confident in making decisions and less dependent on the approval of others. If the idea of a sacred marriage feels distant, remember, It does not happen overnight. It unfolds slowly each time you sit with conflicting emotions and listen to both voices within instead of silencing one. And you don't have to do it alone. This is where community becomes essential. When you share your story with others on a similar path of integration, you witness many forms of kanayungtio, someone learning to balance career and inner life, another finding a way to both protect themselves and open to love. Each story becomes a mirror helping us see our own. I invite you into such a space where uncomfortable questions are welcomed, where inner conflict is not treated as weakness, but as the raw material for creating a new self. Here you'll meet young Americans learning to balance the relentless pace of modern life with a deeper need for meaning. And when you begin to feel that inner union, sometimes just in a small moment, when reason and feeling both nod in agreement over a choice, you'll realize you are no longer split in two. You begin to live as a whole being. This is the stepping stone toward the next stage of the journey, facing the self, the whole, the deepest center of the psyche, which Jung saw as the ultimate goal of individuation. In the next part, we will explore the self not as an abstract philosophical idea, but as a living experience, where you are no longer merely the storyteller, but the story itself living through you. As we move closer to the concept of the self, the wholeness, Jung described, the journey is no longer just about recognizing and uniting opposing parts, but about living consciously in an ongoing connection between the conscious and the unconscious. This is the stage where many people notice a subtle yet profound shift. Choices are no longer driven entirely by fear or habit, but arise from a central point within a place where something simply feels right even before the mind can explain why. Jung saw the self as the guiding archetype and inner compass. Connecting with it requires a skill, the practice of regular dialogue with yourself. One of the most effective tools for this is reflective journaling, not the kind where you jot down what you ate or did that day, but writing as a way of listening to the deeper voices within. Jung often encouraged patients to record dreams, emotions, sudden images, or stray words that appeared in the mind. This is more than just keeping a record. It creates a bridge for the conscious mind to revisit and engage with the unconscious. When journaling, you can ask yourself questions that seem simple on the surface, but open into unexpected depths. Self-reflection, checklist, and questions. What today triggered my strongest reaction, joy, or anger, and why? Is there a part of me that is being ignored or unheard? What images or feelings came from my most recent dream? What do they remind me of in waking life? If my self could send me a message today, what would it say? What am I most avoiding right now? Set aside at least 10 minutes a day to write freely, without editing, without judgment. Think of it as inviting the unconscious to sit down for coffee and tell you stories your conscious mind usually ignores. Many in the global Jungian community share that after only a few weeks of such journaling, they begin to notice repeating emotional patterns, dream symbols, becoming clearer, and most importantly, a growing sense of familiarity with themselves. For an even deeper practice, pair journaling with active imagination, the method Jung developed to speak directly with the images or characters that arise in the mind. You might write a question to an image from a dream, then let it answer as if you were having a real conversation. Often the answers contain a wisdom you didn't know you possessed. This is where community becomes a powerful catalyst. When you share a dream, a journal entry, or an archetypal image with fellow travelers, you're not just getting feedback, you're participating in a miniature collective unconscious. The stories and symbols of others can trigger fresh insights within you. We become mirrors for one another, helping hidden pieces of the unconscious gradually take shape. I invite you to join such a space where sincerity takes precedence over perfection and where every share is a step forward for everyone. Remember, the self is not a perfect end state where you'll never face problems or conflict again. On the contrary, it is the ability to stand firmly in the center, even while chaos swirls around you. It is staying connected to your true self amid the demands of society, work, and relationships. Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Journaling is the lamp you light for yourself each day. In the next section, we'll explore how meaningful coincidences, synchronicity, often begin to appear when you live closer to the self. These are moments when the outer world mirrors exactly what is happening within, giving you the sense of being guided by an invisible hand. And when you understand how this works, you'll know how to recognize and use these moments as signposts on your inner journey. What for when we have spoken of the self of light and shadow of dialogue with the unconscious and the union of opposites, the next step is to carry all of this into everyday life. Because if all our realizations remain only on the page of a book or within the quiet of a meditation room, they will eventually fade. Jung often emphasized psychological knowledge only truly lives when it is experienced, when you step into the world as a transformed being. I want to share something personal. A few years ago, I went through a period of deep disorientation. The work I once loved began to feel heavy, relationships were tense, and it felt as if everything I had trusted was collapsing. That was when I decided to apply Jungian methods systematically rather than simply reading and remembering. This process changed everything, and I want to offer it to you as a step-by-step guide. You can begin right now. Step 1. Recognize the shadow through emotional reactions. Each time you feel angry, irritated, or strongly triggered, pause. Instead of blaming the situation or someone else, ask, what part of me is being touched right now? This is when you catch the shadow at work. Real example. During that difficult time, I noticed I would often snap when criticized. Journaling revealed the deeper fear being seen as not good enough, a wound that traced back to childhood. Step 2. Active dialogue with symbols or images that appear. Use journaling or creative expression, drawing, storytelling to converse with the image. Don't control the outcome. Let it speak whatever it wants to say. Real example, I once dreamed of climbing a mountain with a very heavy backpack. When I asked the image what it was, the answer came, I carry the expectations of others. Step 3. Integrate opposites. Identify the inner conflict, logic versus feeling, control versus surrender, and find a way for both to coexist in your decision-making. Real example. When choosing a new project, I listened to the excitement in my emotions and checked whether it matched my current resources. Step 4. Live close to the self through small daily actions. Choose one thing each day that expresses your authentic self, not the social role you play. It might be spending 30 minutes on an old passion or saying no to something you don't truly want. Real example, I began painting again, not for work, but because it was a part of me I had abandoned. Step 5. Observe synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. As you live closer to the self, notice how external signs strangely align with your inner state. These may be signals that you're on the right path. Real example. The week I began painting again, an old friend called to invite me to a small art exhibition. This practice is not a straight line. There will be times you slip back into old reactions, days when you don't feel like writing or reflecting. But the important thing is to keep going. Small steps still accumulate into great change. And I want to emphasize, you do not need to walk this path alone. Connect with others who are also walking the Jungian journey. In community, you'll discover you're not the only one confused, not the only one carrying heavy backpacks. The reflections and sharing of others will help you see the hidden corners you can't always see alone. I invite you to join us to share journaling, dreams, symbols, and those moments of synchronicity whose magic can only be truly understood by those who have lived them. Because this journey is not only about studying psychology, it's about learning to live a life of deeper meaning. And in the next section, we will enter a special topic: how to close a cycle of personal transformation and step into an entirely new phase where you are no longer just a seeker, but begin to serve as a guide for others. And now, as we bring this journey to a close, I want you to pause and take a deep breath. Because what you've just heard is not simply Carl Jung's theory, not just distant concepts about the shadow, the self, or ancient symbols. It is an invitation to enter the most honest dialogue you will ever have with yourself. You see, Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The path you've just walked, from recognizing the shadow, decoding symbols, integrating opposites, living closer to the self, to noticing meaningful coincidences. These are all small yet essential steps leading you to a place where you don't just understand yourself, you feel life flowing through you. Remember, no one else can live your life for you. The stories and examples I've shared are only lanterns lighting the path ahead, but the road itself, you must walk it. And perhaps you'll come to see that there is no final destination, only an endless widening of awareness. Each time you face a new part of yourself, you become more whole and more humble before the vastness of the human soul. I want you to think back, what in this video stirred you the most? Was it an image, a story, or an idea that touched a part of you long forgotten? Let yourself write that down. And if you're ready, share it in the comments. Not just so it'll know, but so that others who may be walking a journey like yours can hear the echo of their own soul in your words. And if this is your first time walking alongside me, know that there are many more journeys ahead. We will keep decoding the secrets of the unconscious, exploring archetypes, shadow work, individuational, in a space where every voice is heard. If you wish to continue, subscribe, not as a mechanical click, but as a commitment to yourself, a promise to take one more step into the exploration of your inner world. Because as Jung reminded us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Yet it is there that you find freedom. And if you pay attention, you'll realize you've never truly been walking alone. You're moving alongside thousands of other souls, each seeking their own truth. We are travelers of the psyche, and here you will always have a place to rest, to tell your story, and to hear the stories of others. So when you close this video, don't just slip back into the rhythm of daily life and let it all fade like a morning dream. Choose one small thing you can do today to live more authentically. A conversation you've never dared to start, a journal page you've never written, or simply a quiet minute to listen to the voice within. That is how you make this journey truly alive. And I'll be here waiting for you in the next video, where we will go deeper into another mystery of the soul, a mystery that just might change the way you see the world around you.